invite you to Inspiration Station. Today I am going to be showing you how to make a card like this. Not this exact card. This is just such a fun card. Look how that opens up. I belong to a group of other people who make cards, and then we share our card with each other, and then it inspires us to make our own cards. And so today I am going to show you how to make a card like this. Not this card, but a card like this, because this is what inspired me today. So join me here at Inspiration Station. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. This was the card I told you that was my inspiration. Somebody had sent it to me. It is the funnest card. It's so fun to open. It just has this unique fold, and so I was inspired by this card. So for Inspiration Station today, this is my inspiration, and here is the card that I designed. So with that in mind, let's get our supplies. I'm going to get that out of the way. And we are going to need a piece of Pool Party. I have cut this at 4 1/4 by 11 inches. And then we are going to score this, and I will show you that in a moment. I have got some Whisper White and some Night of Navy. I've got 3 pieces of Whisper White. I have a piece that is cut at 4 by 5 1/4. That's going to be the inside of our card. I have a piece of Whisper White that is cut at 3 1/2 by 2 1/4, and that's going to be the background for this. And I have a piece that is cut at 1 1/4 by 4 1/4, and that's going to be for our sentiment. I have 3 pieces of So Saffron. This piece is cut at 3 1/4 by 2. And then I have 2 pieces that you can see here that are cut at 5 1/8 by 1 7/8. And then I have 2 pieces of the Night of Navy, and that is cut at 5 inches by 1 3/4. Then we will also need from Stampin' Up the Ornate Layers dies, and I'm going to pull those out so we'll have them. We need this rectangle, the stitched rectangle, and we're going to use that on our white. And then we need this border that's stuck in there pretty good, and it's this frame border. These are such a beautiful set of dies. Wow, and there's a lot in there, so those are going to be really nice. We're also going to be using the Ornate Thanks, and I'm going to be using Thank You and You're Amazing, and that's in here as well. So we're going to be using those 2 stamps. We're going to be using the Stampin' Cut Emboss, the embossing folder for the Ornate Flower or Ornate Floral 3D embossing folder. And it is going to give us this really pretty added background. And then from Ornate Style, which is just a beautiful set, I'm going to be using the big flower. And then you can see that our card opens the exact same way as the other one. And then we've stamped our thank you inside. So we're going to be using the big thank you set or stamp as well. Our inks today that we're going to be using is Versamark, and we're going to be using some gold embossing powder, and this is an old one that I got from Stampin' Up years and years ago, but it's still the same exact gold embossing powder. Embossing powder doesn't change. I've got my Night of Navy stamp pad, and then I have my Pool Party stamp pad. And when I found these colors, I actually got out a color coach, and you can find those on Stampin' Up, or you can ask me for one, and I'd be happy to send you a color coach. And it just gave me some different ideas, because I thought, well, what if I want to use a totally different color palette? And I thought, I'm going to use Pool Party, but then I couldn't decide what colors I wanted with the Pool Party, so I pulled out my color coach, and that's how I got that color combination, and I was really happy with it. So it's a little unusual and not quite what you want to put or think of putting together, but that's what I did. So we're going to go ahead with our scoring. That'll be really quick, and I do need to pull my arm out because it needs to be a little longer. And I want to score this piece of Pool Party on the long edge, and I am going to score it at 2 3/4. Maybe not quite at, just a tidge under so it'll fold nicely. Get my cutting blade out of the way. 2 3/4, and again at, I just want to double check my measurements here, 8 1/4. So 2 3/4 and 8 1/4, and again I'm just a little shy of that so that it folds nicely. And that is my scoring. And then you can see is this will come in like that. A few things to prep before we get going. I'm going to start with this piece because it's going to take, it'll need to dry for just a moment. Oh, the other thing I forgot is we need some Stampin' Blend. And I've pulled out, you can get any colors that you want. I've got the yellows, I've got the daffodil, dark and light. I have the light and dark granny green, and then or granny apple, and then I have the light and dark balmy blue. You could use Pool Party or any of the others, but those are the ones that I grabbed really fast. Okay, so now is what we want to do is we want to take our Versamark. We're going to get our big stamp, and I want to scratch a piece of paper here because I don't want ink all over my work area because I don't want to get it on something else. So I've got just a scratch piece of paper, and I'm going to just ink this up really well with the Versamark. And the reason I want this to be done first is so it just has a minute to be heated up and then a little tiny bit of drying time before I play around with it. So we're going to ink that up and just put it right over our white here, and it will come off the page because it's it'll come off your stamped paper because it's bigger than your paper, and you see that, but that's fine. That's what I wanted it to do. And then I know you can't see that. You might be able to catch the glimmer a little bit. And turn this over so I don't get embossing powder on it. And then I'm going to just quickly put the embossing powder on it. Everybody has their own way. This is what I do, and it works just fine. I could get a fancy container, but I just haven't. And I just kind of give it a little flick on the back. Flick that over, and before I ever get out a heat gun or anything else, I just empty my powder back in its container and get it out of the way, because I've been known to leave it there and then blow it all over, and then no more embossing powder. Then I'm going to go ahead and heat this up, and I've learned a little trick, and this is going to be a little loud. I've learned a little trick with this. If you hold your paper just by a corner up in the air, you don't want to burn yourself, hold it up, it embosses faster because the heat can get through the paper as opposed to if you lay it down. So we're going to just heat this up until everything goes shiny. And then once it's shiny, you know that it is heated and set. You see it starting to go there. You see it starting to change? You see that, how it's starting to change and get really shiny? Okay, and there you go. It's all shiny, and you can see the difference, and I'm just going to set that down for a moment and let that just cool down. You can do this a couple ways. You can put this on your grid paper and line it up so that your words are face up, and put it exactly on a line, and then put your clear block over it, and you would line it up as well right on the lines to get a good image. But I'm going to go ahead and use my Stamparatus, and the reason I'm going to do that is because I have found when I am stamping words that if I make a mistake and I have to go back over it, or I don't get a good clear image, I'm always so bummed because I worked so hard to get a great image and then it's ruined. First thing I'm going to do is decide where I want my image, where I need my paper to be. So I'm going to just find some lines on my grid paper, and then I know I want this kind of in this area, right? That looks fairly lined up. It may not be perfect, but as what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here with my image on top and see if it's lined up. And it's not lined up as straight as I would like it, so I can look at the grid lines and adjust it so that my words do go across reasonably straight. So I've got that the way I want it. So this one for the inside, we're going to use our pool party, and I'm just going to ink that up really well. And now I'm going to get this out of my way. I'm going to come down here and just give it a little back rub. And actually that looks great, so I don't have to do it twice, which is phenomenal because sometimes I do. I try to line it up on a line, and then I try to line my block up, which is going to be hard because I don't want my head in the shot. But I'm going to hope that's close, and I don't think it is, but we'll do our best. And I'm going to set my piece here, and this time I'm going to ink it up really good on the pool party, and then I'm going to just stamp off lightly, just lightly, because I don't want it that dark. And then I'm going to come down here, and I need to move it so I can see, and then I'll show it to you in just a second. And I'm going to hold that there just a minute to let the ink or the paper pull the ink off my stamp. And you can see that's lighter. That's okay, that I want it to be lighter. You don't have to, but because I'm stamping over that, I want to be able to make sure it's just the way I want it. I guess that's the best way to say it. I want it that way. Then I'm going to come back in with my You're Amazing and put that on my block. So I've got You're Amazing, and this time we're going to use the Night of Navy, and you'll see why I wanted that lighter. And we can do it both ways and see which one we like better. Then I'm going to pull this over so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to stamp right over the thanks with the You're Amazing. And now you can see why I wanted that offset just a little bit. Now let's see what it would look like, because we've got two sides of a piece of paper, which is always nice. So we can see if we like that darker. So you can see which one you like better, and I'll just show you really quick. Again, pull this here where I can see it. Now that's much darker, and I don't know how we'll like that. Again, with the Night of Navy, I don't think it matters that much. You do what you like, but that gives you two options. I'm going to close our inks and get them out of the way because we are done with those. And now I want to bring this back in, our piece right here, because it's set now and cool to the touch. And we're going to do some quick coloring. And I'm going to start with my darks. And I'm going to use the fine tip on these so you can see what we're doing. And I'm going to take the fine tip, and I am just going to run it around my edges. Now you can do this from center and go light to dark, and I'm going to go pretty fast because it's almost going to have a watercolor look, so if it's not perfect, it's okay. And the other great thing is, because this is embossed, we have a little bit of an outline. So, and this is because we're mounting this onto something else, I'm just using the regular Whisper White. If you were going to do this on one that you're going to see the back of it, you want to use the heavy or the glimmer, because it does bleed through. So you want to be careful of that. And I've got the dark blue. I'm going to come back in and kind of do the same thing on these guys, kind of go around some of their petals. I think I'm going to come back in on my blue really quick, and I'm going to put the darker yellow centers in those. That's good. And then finally I've got my dark green, the Granny Apple. Going to do the same thing. I'm going to go down the edge of my stem and along the veins of my leaves. I'm not going to go along the outer edges of the leaves. Yours may look a little different depending on where you how you stamped on your paper. Okay, we've got all of our dark colors on there. I'm going to come back in with my light ones. This time I'm going to use the brush tip. For one thing, it gives us a really quick fill in. You can see I've used this one a lot. It's getting a little, it's seen some love. Just going to color these in. You can see where the darker is showing through, which is exactly what we wanted to have happen. I really do think that this Ornate Garden Suite if I were you and I was looking, I would really think about getting the entire suite because it has so much versatility. The paper is the designer series paper is stunning. You get the two different stamp sets, the dies, the embossing folder. There is a lot in that suite, and it is probably worth investing in the entire suite. I have got my, well, what did I do? I got dark balmy blue, and then I apparently got dark night of navy. Well, that'll be interesting. I'm not going to get up and get something different, so we're just going to go with what we've got. I think it'll be just fine. You know what? It's just fine, because that's the other beautiful thing about our blender pens, is they work well together. You don't have to stay in just one, color set. So you can still work with them and get really nice results. And then finally, our lighter daph. Coloring used to not be my favorite thing because I don't care for how some of the other markers don't blend well. These all blend so beautifully that they've just been so much fun to use, and you can get some really great results quickly. See how our colors all blend, our lights and darks have just mixed and blended together really well. So that is now colored. Now we're going to do a little bit of work with our Big Shot, and that's why I wanted to have everything done, ahead of time so we can work it more efficiently. You use whichever die cutting machine you have. This happens to be the one I have. I've got those two navy pieces, and I'm going to set my Big Shot up for the way I need to emboss it. I'm going to put my blue strips, I'm going to put them both in at the same time. There's no reason not to. And I like to line them up. If you can see that, I like to line them up on the edge where that line is. It's a handy little thing. All right, and I'm just going to run this through. And now those are embossed, and you can see my plates are well loved. I am holding out for a new machine, and I don't want to buy anything new for it until I'm ready. Okay, you can see those. Look how beautiful those are. I just love the depth and the look you get. Now I just need to come back in and do a little bit of cutting. All right, I'm going to bring in my magnetic pad now because it's just going to work a little bit better for me. And we're going to use this framelit, you see that, with this, and I'm just going to set that on here kind of right in the center. Keep in mind you're going to want to run this through a couple of times to get all the little weedy pieces out, because you can see that it has lots of tiny pieces. I'm going to set this one down with this framelit, or die, excuse me, and I'm going to come right to the edge there, and I'm going to give that a good run through. And like I said, I'm going to do it a couple times just because I want to make sure that I don't have to do a whole lot of weeding on this, and I may even find I'm going to find a piece of scrap for that. So what I'm going to do is just run that in as a shim, and that just gives me a little bit more pressure, because I know, having worked with this, that my particular Big Shot, for some reason, sometimes on these weedy ones, is not always as friendly. Take that off, and take this off, and alright, so I'm going to take this and just toss that over there. Now you can see what I mean by being weedy. I don't know why I call it weedy, I just do. I'm going to come in with just my take your pick tool, and I'm going to use the piercing end of this. I'm just going to quickly weed out any pieces that didn't cut. Okay, and that's that. The other day I didn't run it through very well, and I weeded forever, and you can see kind of in the back here all those pieces. I'll clean that later. All right, so now we are ready for some assembly. Okay, I've got my silicone mat. I've got some all multi-purpose glue, or as we have started calling it, green glue. I don't know why we call it that. I think just because it's got a green cap. I'm going to get my pieces here that we need for assembly, and we're going to start to assemble this card. You also want to probably have a bone folder on hand to get your creases nice and tight. So let's go ahead actually, and we're going to assemble the inside first. The reason I like to use the multi-purpose glue for some projects is gives me a little wiggle room with my glue just to lay pieces down. So I've got that pressed in there. Let's go ahead and put our inside piece that we stamped thank you. A little of this goes a long way, so as you're doing it, you want to, you know, don't get crazy with it. And I always use the silicone mat because then my glue does not stick to anything on my paper and it comes right off my mat. So give this a good glue. And I like to know that my card's going to hold together, and that's another reason I really like to use the glue. And like you see, it can position a little bit if it's not quite straight or quite the way I want it. I like that I have just a little bit of wiggle room. Give that a nice press, and there we have it. Okay, so now I'm going to just set this aside for a moment, and we're going to bring out our two pieces of our yellow and our blue. Okay, so I'm going to take again just a little bit of glue, because you don't want it squeezing out all over your edges, and it will hold. It'll hold nice. And I think the glue is probably a better choice for an embossed piece of paper, because a dry embossed, it holds better because you can get your glue in your little nooks and crannies. And this is going to be right to your edges. You see what a fine edge we have here? Again, give that just a nice press. And we'll do the same thing with the other piece. Just a little tip I have found. I know that if it lines up and has about the same space on these three edges, that the other end is going to be exactly the same. That way I'm not freaking out about this end, because I know I lined these three corners up. All right, we've got that done. Now we're going to do this one, and this one's a little, no we're not, we're going to do this first. We might as well finish this piece. And I've looked at this long enough, I've decided I like the darker because it did dry lighter. So I'm going to use this side of it. And I am going to glue this down onto the one piece. And I want it pretty close to the edge. So you can see that I've got equal on this side, and then on this end. It's not going to matter on this end because it's going to be covered. I'm going to glue that down. Now I have a little trick that I learned from my good friend Connie, and I love this idea. I have some pieces of sponge cut into sections, and you can see they've had glue on them, and it's fine. And I'm going to put a little dab of glue. It's a little sticky because I keep it in a container. I'm going to put a little dab of my glue here. The reason I'm doing this is I want to be able to glue these this down and have it hold, and it's hard to get the glue on it without it coming through on everything. So if I put glue on here and then I just kind of dab it in here, and I probably got way more than I needed, it's fine. I'm going to just go over this, and as what happens is I get the glue on all of my pieces, but it doesn't bleed through and get all over. And is what I'm going to do with that. I'm just going to pull this aside for a moment and put this on my piece of So Saffron and just kind of give it a little bit of a background. The reason I did this, and I wasn't going to originally, but I found it didn't hold up well enough on my card for the kind of card we're going to need. So if you're going to or if you're going to cut and do a piece like that, you need a little bit of backing on it. In my sample, this one she used thick white cardstock, so it holds it down. This one, after it's been embossed and stuff, it's just a little lighter, and so it was not going to do its job. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and finish assembly. This will glue, when this glue dries, I can just peel it off, and that will be great. So because our card opens, you see how it opens like this? We've got to remember that we can only glue part of it. And this time I will, I'm going to use a pencil just to mark where I want to sit these or set these so that I know where they're going to attach. So I know that I still want it to line up on my card so each side is even. I'm going to put this right so I know that you can see it, so that each side is fairly close to the same. Then I want to bring this one in too, just so I can kind of see and eyeball it. I know it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but I'd like it to be, you know, somewhat symmetrical and look nice. And I am going to just, you know, play with it for a minute here until I see where I want these pieces. And then I'm just going to give it just a little tick mark, just so I know, because I don't want to, you know, I just don't want to, I've worked too hard on it, right? And then this one is actually glued down on this side. Okay. Now, again, I'm just going to take a quick look, and I know that this bottom piece will adhere on the left side of my card, and this one will adhere on the right side of the card. So I'm going to just give this a quick press down again. I know I want those to line up like that and that, because I gave myself those tick marks. Right? And I want to just do the same thing on this side, because I want it to be straight. Okay. Now I'm going to flip this over carefully, and I'm going to see where my line, where my card opens, and I'm just going to do another tick mark right there. I know I can't let my adhesive go past that place. And then I'm going to do the same thing on my bottom piece. Again, just giving myself a little tick mark so that I know where my adhesive has to go. Now you can see my little tiny marks. This time I'm going to go ahead and use my snail and get this adhered down. So, and I should have my silicone mat here to not make, I don't want to get this anywhere. And I am going to give this a fairly healthy strip of adhesive, because I want it to hold together. I'm going to come up, and you can see where it's only adhered to the one side. Then I'm going to come in really quick with my eraser and just take those two tick marks away. You could do that after the fact too. Now I'm simply going to do the exact same thing on the other side. I want to make sure I get my, yeah. You want to make sure you get your adhesive on the correct side. Otherwise you won't get your fun little fold. And it might be a good idea to get your little weeds out of the way too. Or you'll have those. And again, line that up with my tick marks. Make sure it kind of lines up with the top. And give that a nice press. Okay, so now we have our folds. You can see how that folds. Our final step, and we're going to use Stampin' Dimensionals for this. Again, only half of it, because it's got to open. My goodness, those weeds are everywhere. So I want to line this up so it's about the same distance top and bottom. So I know that I can eyeball it and go, okay, I can't put my dimensionals much past that. So I'm going to flip that over, and I am going to be generous again with my dimensionals. I feel like if I put the kind of work I do into a card, that I can be generous with the adhesive, because I don't want it to fall apart, right? There we go. And now your card opens like that. And there you have it. So you have the one that my original inspiration, the one I designed with it, and the one we made today. And you see I used just a little bit different colors. And it's a little different because of where my stamp placement was, but basically the same card. So I really hope that you enjoyed Inspiration Station, and you can see that there's all kinds of things that will inspire us, and I hope you'll join me next time. Thank you for watching. I'm Brenda with My Pastor's Wife Designs.